she says in indigenous communities, when you go see a shaman, typically in the initial experience with the shaman, he'll ask you 4 questions. And the 4 questions that he asks, the answers that you give also determine the diagnosis and the prescription, what to do.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Purple Stars podcast. My name is Sarah, I am your host, and this is part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Stephen Farmer. If you haven't listened to part 1, which we released last week, please make sure you do not miss this episode, because we talked about how to heal your body by integrating shamanic methods into psychotherapy, how trauma shapes our lives, the fascinating concept of soul retrieval, the emotional messages behind physical symptoms, and also the role of spirit guides and the natural world in holistic healing. So here we go. This is part 2 with Dr. Stephen Farmer. For me, health, the saying, health is our biggest wealth. I agree with that on so many levels, because when we start to understand the language of our bodies, it opens so much.
Yep.
And it just brings so much healing, not just to the body. And a client of mine, I remember she was so angry. She said, I don't understand. I constantly get sick. It was in the very beginning when we started working with one another. And, there were weeks in the month, like she couldn't leave bed because she was so fatigued, so much inflammation, and she was just really, really not well. And she said, my body constantly lets me down. I'll never forget that she said that. And I said, actually, your body's not letting you down. Your body's your best friend. Your body is willing to go through all this discomfort just for you, to set you free.
Did she hear you?
Wow. I could see it really switched ever since. She feels so much better. And she has also had so many different healing modalities. And I think once we are open to receiving the guidance from our bodies or through our bodies, there are so many beautiful healing modalities, whether it's, as you said, EMDR or shamanic healing. Also, I think it's very important, as you said, there are times where we also have to incorporate general practices, general medicine. And I always say it's not alternative, it's complementary. I see it all as a whole. And that's why I think it's so beautiful that our body is this connection point of, mind and soul. And when we're open to that wisdom, we can really tap into our health, having, amazing relationships, healthy relationships, healing relationships, tapping into our purpose. There are just so many ways that change once we start understanding the language of the body. And something that I'm so excited about as well is when we look at the physical symptoms of animals. And I'm curious, I want to talk more about what your experiences is in your work. So I've been coaching people for 10 years now. And over the years, it was very interesting. I've had many clients with domestic animals. And so many times I saw parallels, whether it was certain, fears, stress responses, but also physical symptoms. But not just physical symptoms like the owner has IBS, the dog has IBS, not just that,
right.
But where it gets a little bit more complex from the outside. For example, the owner doesn't have anything, but the dog has a lot and is mirroring the emotions of the owner.
Hmm.
And that's where I get most interested in because I'm like, wow, let's look at that. And I see the same way our animals love us so much that they're willing to go through that discomfort to be like, hey, there's something that you need to address. And of course, there are certain things that are genetic, also certain things that are age related, you know, like this aside. But anything else, I find so interesting. And I want to share actually a personal story as
Cool.
well.
Very cool. Yeah.
So we adopted Felix in February. So he's a rescue dog. And when we got him, he had a lot of ear infections. Like it was just one after the other. And also he was constantly scratching himself. So of course it was also because of the food that he got before he was with us.
Right.
And also, like getting from one place to the other and the circumstances, how they treated him and so on.
Right.
But then I was like, okay, let me do all the healing. Let me see what messages are in there and what the lessons. And first of all, when you look at ear infections, like the ears from Chinese medicine are related. It's a lot of fear. Because they're related like to the kidneys, and that's the fear. And then I was like, okay, fear, of course, like being, a shelter dog coming from one place to the other. But then I was like, okay, but what is it mirroring me? And then I was like, okay, it's not just fear, but also the ears are representing intuition, listening within.
Good one.
So for me, it was like, oh, because that was a time I was like, oh, okay, there's another layer of intuition. It's really important. I let myself be guided. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing, scratching and like being, like what's itching me is obviously one thing. But I was like, no, that's nothing I resonate with. But the skin is like the mirror from the soul, from the inside, not just the eyes, but also the skin. It's the identity. And like the itching also is often like, where is my home?
Okay. Yeah.
And for Felix, of course, like he was being taken away from the mom and all his friends and brothers. But for me, it was also, I was moving from Europe to the US. And I remember I started crying so much when I was like, analyzing all of that, because I was like, wow. So I have a new dog that's willing, also to share all these physical symptoms and already comes with so much wisdom. So I journaled a lot about it. I did all the tapping, also the chakra healing. I also have a method where I incorporate all healing modalities that I've learned along the way, where it's basically creating a circle of healing for both the animal and the person. And yeah, so that's just like one example. I have many also from my clients, but I wanted to share like a personal one. It's really amazing how bodies reflect so much and how much wisdom they hold, whether it's our own bodies or also the bodies of animals that love us.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, my response just now just happened, like this surge in my body, speaking of.
Mm-hmm.
And I really pay attention to that, because another piece that I got to that, if it resonates with you, is that this occurred or was noticed at a time when you were itching to get something important done.
Mm-hmm. I just get goosebumps. Yes.
Does that make
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think that's a very mild demonstration. I don't profess to be like a pro at it, but I'm pretty good. But I'm, the paying attention, just even as we're talking,
Mm-hmm.
something happened with my body and I needed to pay attention to that. Then it translated to my brain.
Mm-hmm.
I often say, like I said, about uh, what you see, hear, and feel, and in response. And I've been dabbling with this whole notion of intuition. What exactly is it? And I've come up with a new description, and not a new description, a perspective. Let's put it that way. It doesn't mean I'm right. I might change, a year or two from now. It may change, depending on
Mm-hmm.
uh, information I'm fed or how I analyze it. But it used to be, I would say, what you see, what you hear, sensations in your body, and cognitive are the four modalities of perception, perceiving spiritual information. I've always been troubled a little bit by cognitive. So, what I put together is sensations in the body that we may or may not be aware of that translate to thoughts in the mind, an interpretation or a connection between the sensations and what comes up mentally. To me, that's very satisfying because it doesn't have to be, I don't have to be right about that. It's just that it makes complete sense because, like, obviously you are very attuned to your body as well. And the more I think we can pass that along to people, just encouragement, inspiration, pay attention to your body. What's going on? What's it saying to you?
Mm-hmm.
What are the ears saying? Whether like Chinese medicine, this is what the ears mean, when the ears are plugged up like that. Or it could be just straightforward. What am I not hearing?
Yeah. Or what am
It
I
could
tired of hearing?
well, you can almost so knock it off, okay? Good, you're quick. I like that. So yeah, it's a um, fascinating journey in general. I guess I'd
Mm-hmm.
say life itself, but it is a fascinating journey of exploration. As we develop these different means through, such as your podcast and the information you convey, and the clients you work with, and the teachings that you bring
Mm-hmm.
forward. I admire you for that. I think you're,
Thank you.
well, I get that you're very dedicated, to providing the service. You're really on purpose, is another way to say it. You're very
It
coherent.
it is very, very much my purpose. Like I always say, it's my air to breathe.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, when I keep this story, I wanted to share it with
Tell
you.
me. I was just about to come back to that story.
So the story is this: is a wonderful mentor teacher that is now in spirit world. Thank you. Angelus is her name. Angelus Arian um, was an anthropologist that studied, a number of indigenous systems and ways of working with shamanic realities, etc. And then she would put them together, and she would put them together typically in teachings of fours. And I don't know about you, but I love four. Give
Oh
me
yeah.
give me three or four things like the guys that keep telling me, stand tall, breathe, and keep your sense of humor. Again and again and again and again. And number three is just as important as the first two.
Mm-hmm.
So Angelus she actually had or has a book out called the FOUR, Fourfold Way. And so she has a lot of her teachings if any of the listeners want to look her up. But she says in indigenous communities, when you go see a shaman, typically in the initial experience with the shaman, he'll ask you four questions. And the four questions that he asks, the answers that you give also determine the diagnosis and the prescription, what to do. It's just so simple. I love simplicity like that, like the water on the tree and the water on Mother Earth. When did you stop singing? 2, when did you stop dancing? 3, when did you stop being enchanted by stories? And number 4, when did you stop listening to the sweet sound of silence? Isn't that great? I love that. It's like, yeah, okay, so I got to sing. Okay,
Mhm.
I'll do that. And then I don't know what the results are, necessarily, but I think it's a really good teaching and a reminder of one of her reminders in 4s. Again, I like 4s because you remember them.
Mhm.
21 ways to greater success. You go, well, let me write all these
Oh,
down.
yeah, exactly.
No, I lose the notes, what were those 21 ways? No, but 4s, just like the story I just shared, they stick with you.
Mhm.
You're going to walk away from this interview and you're going to think, singing, dancing, enchantment, and silence. Singing, dancing, enchantment, and silence. There's my prescription. Or whoever may be listening to this, maybe going, that's right. I used to sing. Or the story I told you about the soul retrieval. I used to dance.
Mhm.
Stories. Oh, man. I bet you're a storyteller, aren't you?
I love storytelling.
Yeah, storytelling is great. I am too. I'm a storyteller,
Mhm.
and stories are I remember when I was hired to teach at a 2-year college in Orange County, California. And it was a branch of 2 that already existed. It was the Orange Coast Community College system, but it was one where they rented different facilities, and then the teachers would go to the facility and teach whatever they're going to teach. The other thing is that they hired a bunch of us, myself included, to initiate this new college called Coastline Community College. Um, the guy that did, so we all gathered for a talk by this fellow named Art Lang. I remember him because one of his books I had read on assertiveness training, and that's one of the things I used to teach because I was a shy kid and I had to learn how to talk to people. Actually, conversation, it's okay. And one of the takeaways from what Art Lang had talked to us about was, as teachers, when you give an example, give um, a principle. Excuse me. When you give a principle, you also give an example. The
Mhm.
example could be a story. If I say to you, let's say you're a student of mine or something, and I say to you, there are 4 ways that shamans diagnose, and then I give you the 4 ways, and then I take one. I go singing, for instance. I went to a shaman one time, and he asked me that question: when did you stop singing? And
Mhm.
I came home and I looked at my 1, 2, 3, 4 guitars and the fact that I've written songs and I haven't sung for like 2 weeks and I miss it. So therefore, pick up the guitars, sit down, start picking and grinning, and play. So anyway, I think that was a really good takeaway from that
Mhm.
gathering of teachers where he taught the teachers about how to teach. And that was one thing. You do it very well, I can tell.
Thank you.
I think I do it, reasonably.
Also, yeah, amazing.
God bless you. Thank you. I am honest. Yeah, we are. We're storytellers, but they're
You,
with a
Stephen, so I listened to one of your episodes on your, not on one, but like many episodes of your podcast, which is called Healing for Your Soul. But in one of them, you did share also these 4 questions. And what was interesting for me came up very different things. The reason why I'm mentioning this, so people also know there's no right, no wrong. Like anything can come up with those 4 questions. For me, it was, so the first one was singing. I remembered a situation many, many years ago. I was watching this YouTube video and Dr. Wayne Dyer, he said, it's so important that you don't die with your music still within.
brilliant. Yeah,
That
brilliant.
was the first thing. So I journaled about that one. The second one with dance, I remembered one day when I was journaling, I thought, oh, the word abundance has the word dance inside.
Good.
So whenever we want to feel abundant, it's important to dance through life. And sometimes the dancing might be dancing by ourselves, dancing with someone else, freestyle dancing in the group. And the transition can sometimes be a little difficult. But
Yeah.
it's important to find, our rhythms if we want to, and dance for life. That was the second one.
Yeah.
Then the third one was with the stories. And I was like, okay, maybe making more time again, reading books. Because I used to read so many books when I was a little kid. And then, the older you get, I still read a lot, but not as much as I would love to.
Yeah.
So I'm making more time to read.
Good.
And then, what was the fourth question again? I'm sorry.
When did you stop singing? When did you stop dancing?
Mm-hmm.
Did you stop being enchanted by stories? And when did you stop listening to the sweet sound of silence?
Oh, yeah. So I meditated on my new word for 2025. I usually have one word that's like something that I then focus on. That's my intention of the year where I keep coming back. And for 2025, I felt like, let me sit there, be in stillness, silence to get the word. And I thought maybe this year it's magic or adventure or excitement, but I got stillness.
You want to see something? I know the listeners can't see this, but this one came up just the other day.
Oh my God. For anyone who isn't watching on YouTube, it's an oracle card and it says lake and stillness.
And look at that picture. Yeah,
It's amazing.
Picture. Yeah. This just came up about 2 days ago because I do that sometimes. I'll just draw.
Mm-hmm.
So both got that reminder. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah.
No, I love this. Particularly because just 3 or 4 episodes ago, I had a friend of mine on my podcast. We talk about grief, and he said, "Oh, Sarah, you talk so much like in imagery, and that I talk so much about water." So it's interesting also with the lake. And so then I obviously was thinking a little bit more about stillness, but I was like, stillness doesn't mean that nothing is happening, but it's a reminder that my greatest power, my greatest inspiration, my greatest act of service, my greatest purpose, my biggest potential is born in stillness. Yeah. So that's what came out of the 4 questions listening to your podcast.
Yeah. And stillness does not imply that, as you said, nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
There's always movement taking place.
Yeah.
The blood is coursing through your body, your heart's beating, your breathing, etc. And there's the trees are waving hello because the slight breeze. I mean, any number of things.
Mm-hmm.
The earth is still turning.
And we're breathing while we're still.
Absolutely. It's always movement, everything, all the time. It never stops, even when you're sleeping, there's always movement. So the dance, back to singing, dancing, etc. I would invite everybody who's listening, put on some medium, maybe to slow music, something, and then stand there and breathe. And then listen to how I'm saying this. Washto, allow your body to move in whatever way it wants to. I dare you all to try that. It's amazing. In fact, I'm going to do that today as I think about it.
Right afterwards.
Yeah, I just got a good prescription. Yeah, it's that movement to recognize Washto. It's always moving. Spirit is always, whatever way, shape, form it is, your heartbeat, your breathing, etc. But then engage in that in a certain way through movement. Let your body move. Allow your body to move in accord with whatever way that it wants to move.
Stephen, thank you so much for sharing this story. It's beautiful. And also I always love when guests bring practical, 4 questions, this exercise, because it's such a great way of people to get in touch with new modalities, new practices, to try to make it into their own dance, literally. And This brings me to an area that I really want to dive in before we then wrap up this episode, which is ancestral healing.
Hmm.
You wrote a book titled Healing Ancestral Karma: Free Yourself from Unhealthy Family Patterns. Before we go into the meat, as you called it earlier, or heart of this,
Yeah.
can you explain to those who are new to this concept that certain patterns can, like chronic illnesses, unhealthy relationship dynamics, even certain repetitive cycle of tragedies or financial struggles can be passed on from generations, even from generations we haven't even met?
Yes, I can speak personally about it very briefly. Is
Mm-hmm.
growing up with a poverty mentality. That's I can only have so much money. My mother, I had a stash of money I was saving, and I remember my mother got very upset with me, for saving the money. And how what an imprint that was. You're being
Mm-hmm.
greedy, what she said. Oh, can't be greedy. But
Wow.
I've changed that, and I must say, one influence that I would encourage people, and then I'll come back to your question, is a little book called The Abundance Book by John Randolph Price. It has a program in it of 10 affirmations, and you work with them in a certain way. That's all I want to say about it. It isn't magical. It isn't even necessarily mystical. It's just being able to plant something a little different in terms of attitude about money that you can then bring into your world. So I highly recommend it. So ancestral healing over something like that would be something like being able to connect with your ancestors. And there's a certain process described in the book, and I also have that available. I believe it's on, I want to say Instagram or Facebook. The process itself, where you work with the ancestors directly in sending healing to the ancestor that had the most trouble with that particular issue. It could be a
Mm-hmm.
physical illness. It could be an attitude. It could be like about the money thing. It's kind of lengthy, so I'm not sure I want to go into the whole thing, Sarah. But it's
We
basically,
could, if you want, I will ask your team to send me the link, because then we put it in the show notes so people can then like take their time and go through the entire process.
yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, because it's pretty powerful
Hmm.
process, as you say, process. Um, Sounds like tomato. Anyway, anyway, um, yeah. First off, I would say it's not common for us in the Western world to think much about ancestors. We're so much ahead, and okay, we got to how do you make money and how do you survive and all this, looking ahead. But I think we neglect honoring the ancestors from before, or working with them to heal not only oneself but also to heal that ancestor. And there is a way
Hmm.
that most strongly carries a particular condition, whether it's a physical, like a heart problem or a breathing problem, or what did you say earlier? Something like that is,
Also, unhealthy like relationship dynamics, or certain tragedies. I think is also interesting how this can
yeah,
like repeat over generations.
yes, that's the deal. And so the first step is thank the ancestors.
Hmm.
And if you want to be really specific, because there's one ancestor, Uncle Joe or something, who was a jerk, you can say thank you for my benevolent ancestors. So for
Hmm.
being, to put Uncle Joe aside. And then the next thing is, well, what about Uncle Joe? Maybe we could do some healing with him. He was a grumpy old man, you know,
Hmm.
sad. Oh, he was in the war. Okay. Then there's some wounds that he carries, not just physical wounds, but emotional and
Hmm.
traumatic wounds. Okay, how can we do this? We'll set this up, and the listeners, like you said, can go and find that recording as to the directions, as to a guided meditation to be able to do that. You call on the benevolent beings that you work with, and then you set it up so that you send your consciousness along with the helpers that you have to Uncle Joe, and then send healing across space and time, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
Reiki, but I don't want to call it Reiki, but you send energy healing to that individual.
I love to call it energy medicine.
There you go. It's a way, good way to put it, Sarah. But you send that energy,
Mm-hmm.
back to Uncle Joe, and allow, good key word there too, allow the energy to do the healing. You've already got support. I work with Archangel Michael in this process, and he's a dude. He's a dude. Powerful, powerful, powerful. And then he stands behind me and supports that sending of the healing medicine, the healing energy. And then Joe will then send it back to me, the now healed
Mm-hmm.
condition, and then I receive it with gratitude. That's kind of a quick summary of the process.
Mm-hmm.
It takes about maybe 20, 30 minutes, but it's well worth it. And I say, give it a go. Give it a go, give it a try. Can't hurt anything. Worst could happen. There's nothing that can happen. But based on my experience and reports from others, I wouldn't say it every time. I'd say probably 80% of the time there's a significant shift that takes place with this particular kind of healing. So thanks for asking about that. Yeah.
You mentioned in one of your episodes, it was called Connecting with Ancestors, a really amazing example. There was a woman that suddenly, as far as I can recall, suddenly got like a panic around water. Do you remember this example? Maybe not.
You'll come to me. Yeah.
So unfortunately, then I do have to reveal. So you said in your session, you found out that she had an uncle who died in the Titanic tragedy.
Bingo. Yeah.
And that was such a great example because I think, again, there are certain patterns that are very, like, almost obvious, when they're like certain how, like, let's say all the women are always the financial supporters, or has already been for generations, even in generations where it wasn't yet that common that a woman would work a lot. Or if there are certain physical, symptoms that keep coming, which is not genetically, but like a family pattern, or at a certain age, people dying. Like, I feel like there's so much where it's kind of like, oh, it's kind of obvious this is a pattern that needs to be broken. Right. Or if someone like at a certain age always then suddenly loses all the money. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes it's also not that obvious. It's just a story that comes to my mind. I was working with this executive, and then like he asked me, oh, I have like, he has a nephew who was at that time, I think 2.5 years old, and hadn't spoken a single word. And he was diagnosed with autism, and people around the world, all sorts of experts came and flew in, tried to help the kid, but like no word. So I said, okay, of course, I'm happy to come and see what I can do. And most sessions I worked with his mom, as you probably can imagine, like surrogate healing through the mother particularly. And what was so interesting, so I said, walk me through the process when you were pregnant with your kid. Was there anything that happened, something, that was like traumatic for you? Also, I would love to know what are physical symptoms related with the throat throughout generations before. Could you maybe call your grandma or ask your mom or anyone that could tell us about it? And what was interesting, for generations, people had issues with their throat.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
For generations. And then what was even more interesting, during the pregnancy with that particular son, she had a big situation with her brother where she didn't speak up.
Hmm.
So we did lots of like tapping and healing around, the expression.
Right, right.
And now the kid speaks.
Bravo, bravo.
So
I
I find there's so much potential for healing when we look through all generations. It's
yeah, to see
amazing.
where did that come from? I mean, I mentioned poverty mentality, and in addition
Mm-hmm.
to the experience I shared, is my mother was raised in a very poor situation. I do know that. So she brought that with her into the family and had a lot of shame about it. And guess who got some of that dumped on him?
Mm-hmm.
Yours truly. So yeah, yeah. If you trace back through the ancestry, you can often discover what was the same condition that might be affecting a client or affecting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to mention one thing, just put a pitch in for it. You mentioned the tapping, the EFT. That's a
Yeah.
that's another process that's been very effective in healing these wounds. So I just want to say that
I
too.
love tapping. It's so good.
Oh, yeah, it's cool. I'm not trained in it. I've
Mm-hmm.
experimented with it, but I'm not trained in it. But I respect it greatly. Dawson Church, knew him from way back, and he's been a real proponent and teacher of the tapping, or called EFT, emotional freedom technique,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's
it works.
so good.
It works. Yeah, and that's testimony right there. It works.
Yeah, it totally works. Coming back to the poverty mindset or poverty wound, because money was actually an area that I also wanted to talk.
Sure.
How does the relationship with our parents, or let me rephrase, how can the relationship we have had with our parents influence the relationship we have with money?
Oh, great. I remember stories, that I was there, but I don't remember them particularly, but how we would have pancakes for dinner. My
Hmm.
father, God bless him, he drove heavy equipment like bulldozers and stuff like that. We lived in Iowa. Guess what? 3 or 4 months out of the year, he couldn't get any work, and he was also the drinker, he's the one that was the
Hmm.
alcoholic, the identified alcoholic. My mother was co-alcoholic. Crazy stuff that was going on, in the family at that time. My gut tightens even as the body memory comes up,
Hmm.
like, and then I breathe and release it, but noticeable. So the relationship with money was always one of, there was some kind of shame around having too much. There's a litany, there's a rehearsed belief that I used to hold is like, well, you better not have too much money. I was aware of it sometimes and not aware of it as others. Now, what I mentioned is this abundance book. Not it's the be all and the end all, and tells you everything you need to know about money and your relationships. It's not the point. What it does, it puts a different, proposes a different kind of relationship. And that's why I tell people about it all the time, because number one, I've experienced it twice. I've worked the program that Price, the author, proposes. Now I don't work the program, but I repeat one of the affirmations on a very regular basis. I would say almost daily. Here's the number. This is number 5 of the 10. In other words, he's got 10 affirmations. You say the affirmation. Let's say number 1, and then you write about it. You journal about it. How does
Hmm.
that affect you? Then go to next day 2, etc. And then you do another 3 rounds of that. 40 days. There's little veiled reference to 40 days in the Bible. Here's the affirmation. Money is not my supply. No person, place, or condition is my supply. My awareness, understanding, and knowledge of the all providing activity of the divine mind within me is my supply.
Mm.
My consciousness of this truth is unlimited. Therefore, my supply is unlimited.
That's
I
beautiful.
just got to tell you, it works.
Hmm.
It's like that saying I remember in church religious signs. It works if you work it, and it don't if it won't if you don't.
Yeah.
You know, Okay, clever. But I think what it does, it casts a different way of, first of all, recognizing the divine mind. The activity of the divine mind is always there, and our alignment with that in terms of our thinking and our behavior, etc., is really what I believe. My experience is it helps kind of line all that up to congruency or coherence, to use another word. So I strongly recommend it. As all of you who are listening, give it a go. It's a real simple book. It's got a little bit, the language I call is a little archaic in certain ways, but that, don't let that stop you. You get to the 10 affirmations and work those over a 40-day program. Try it. What's the worst? There's nothing changes. But the best that can happen is you sustain that way of relating to money. We put so much emphasis on the money, and we, that God is our supplier, and the God that's here, that makes this being here, is coherent with the higher self that can relate to money in a different way, unlike how we have been trained or taught, or like in my case, the poverty mentality. I mean, yeah, I went bankrupt one time. Declared bankruptcy. So long ago, I barely remember it. But I remember the shame. I don't feel it right now. I don't get a reaction because it's healed. And part of that healing is money is not my supply, et cetera, the affirmation I just stated. So I think it requires a shift in consciousness in the way you relate to, not just think about money, but relate to it. Yes, thank you. It's practical. That's the exchange we use. Instead of carrots from the garden, or something like that, maybe as our long ago ancestors would do, or going to see a shaman, bringing something in exchange for his or her work. Yeah, we use this paper stuff that goes around that we put so much, so much holiness into, and it's not the money. A very pragmatic way to do it. Anyway, enough speech. I feel like I'm giving a speech, but I just encourage money to check people. Check that out, the Abundance Book.
One example that just came to my mind as well is often when what I've seen in my clients when their parents, weren't together, whether divorced or for whatever reason, and child support wasn't paid for whatever reason, often the belief that comes up is, I'm not worth the money.
Good. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
And often, just one thing I wanted to add is, these are often people that are scared to ask for money. And I'm not saying, oh, lend me money, but like they would do work and then they're scared to send the invoice or actually tell their price, or if someone owes them money to be like, hey, actually, like you still owe me money. And it's interesting. And that's when I do love to really dial into the money, because that I see the money as a tool to tap into that wound.
Yep. Good way to put it. Yeah, it's, and especially in a capitalistic society, there's so much emphasis on that, and there's a lot of, things I've been hearing about the, was it 7% of the wealth, runs the rest of the country and all this. And it's like, I don't want that to infiltrate my relationship. So I'll hear it, but let's just put it over here.
Yeah.
I don't want to, I refuse to adopt that. Okay, that's the way it is. However, money is not my supply, et cetera, as a reminder. And there's a practical side. You still got to pay bills.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's part of that's just part of the deal.
Thank you so much for sharing this, Stephen. I could talk to you for many more hours, but I want to be mindful of your time. And we usually wrap up each episode with a little animal Q&A. And I think you have 2 dogs, right?
One dog.
Oh, 1. Okay, sorry. Why did I think 2? Did you have 2?
Yes, at one time, and the older one is being cared for by a friend that we
Oh, okay.
here. So, yeah,
Okay, because I thought Samson and Scout.
yeah, Samson and Scout. Samson is the other one that's being tended by a.
Okay. Okay. Then I would love to dedicate the Q&A to Scout. One question is, what is one of the many things you're grateful for him?
Wow, it's hard to narrow down one. Something I've been reading, and I'll answer your question directly, just briefly. But again, I've been reading in the midst of Stephen Porget's book on our the polyvagal story, and it was about oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hormone that is typically comes along with a couple other hormones, but how essential it is, to lifting up the spirits, and feeling good and such like that. And the exchange between us two people actually activates that, when we're in relationship, and I mean, we're relating to someone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true with our pets too.
Mm-hmm.
They experience that same degree of comfort that gets elicited by making that connection, looking in his eyes. So I think I would say, in answer to your question, the Q&A, I love him and I know he loves me.
Aw.
That's what I appreciate. I joke
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, well, you just love me because I feed you, but that's part of the deal. It's part of,
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that. But it really is genuine love. I went, if I can share this, I woke up, there was a series about 3 days where every morning I'd wake up, because I was restless sleep or something like that. I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but the F word. So I won't say the F word, but first thing out of my mouth is, oh,
Mm-hmm.
and my guides told me in the writing, the download, I call it, you got to knock that off. You know, breathe in the air and welcome the day. You wrote a song with that line in it, so use it. Breathe in the air and welcome the day.
Mm-hmm.
Let the dog lick your face. That's his way of showing his love, and you don't have to lick his face back. Oh,
That's hilarious.
if I could do that one, thanks, Chief. But anyway, so every morning that's what I do. And
Mm-hmm.
I do let him lick my face. I usually purse my lips because I don't want him to lick my lips, but I compromise that, and he'll come up. But that's his way of expressing his love.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that piece I just shared with you is a response to your question. It's what
Mm.
I love about it. He shows his love.
It's
Yes,
beautiful.
and we play fetch. He's friendly. He's very well behaved. I've trained him, and he's very well behaved with the basics. And um, yeah. So the other is this. I wrote an article. I think it's on my website somewhere. 3 ways that animals calm your anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming across this piece about oxytocin, I'm going, well, yeah, it's very congruent.
Yeah.
Pet a dog, pet a cat. I remember my oldest brother, as he was ailing and on his way out, and he had a cat. His wife had one cat, and he had another cat. His cat would come and lay on him, on his chest, and purr.
Aw.
If you've ever experienced the sensation that
Mm-hmm.
is the purring, the rhythm, like you
Mm-hmm. The
word earlier,
syncing. They even sync the heartbeats in that moment.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not surprised. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a real, it was a real comfort for Ron, and the cat died shortly after he died.
Mm-hmm.
It says it. I don't need to say
Yeah,
anymore.
says a lot.
Yeah, he had fulfilled his purpose. The cat.
Mm-hmm.
Ron did too, but the cat had fulfilled his purpose. And his boss or master or owner, whatever you want to call him. I've started calling for Scout, I'm his boss. I like that.
That
I'm
is
your
funny.
boss. You can't do that. I'm your boss.
Stephen, what do you think? Because you just mentioned purpose. What is Scout's purpose in your life?
Comfort immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just popped into my head right away as soon as you finished the question. I would add love to that to really be love, comfort, love, gratitude
Mm-hmm.
to remind me of those three things. And not just with him, but to keep reminding me. I briefly, and we talked a little about this, the scales of emotion, from
Mm-hmm.
emotions to highest, etc. And I did a little bit of research, kind of informal research on love and gratitude in their relationship. And it's so amazing to me, but makes intuitive sense that on two of the scales that I came across, and this is the frequency of emotions. Everybody knows that when you're in a dark emotion, it's a different frequency. But up there on the scale, the top end was enlightenment. But before enlightenment, there were things like love, gratitude, appreciation, etc. Love and gratitude. People who are listening can't see this, but my fingers are maybe a quarter of an inch apart on both scales. And gratitude was on the top of love.
Mm-hmm.
So I would leave all the listeners with that. 10 gratitudes in the morning. Pause and think from time to time during the day and just speak it out loud. You can whisper it if you're around other people, but all the things that you're grateful for in your life. I'm grateful that I can breathe. I'm grateful that my heart is beating. I'm grateful to meet wonderful people like you. That's true, Sarah. I don't want to,
Thank you.
I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful
Mm-hmm.
for the fact that it rains here, et cetera, et cetera. But to really feel into it,
Mm-hmm.
back to the body, to really feel into that gratitude. And then I think love comes quite naturally along for the ride, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it. I can feel a shift in my body and my awareness. I can feel a shift in how I relate to the world. Because it's either that or be a grumpy old man. What is all this problems that we're having here? I don't understand this. You're not supposed to park there.
So true.
I made you laugh. I'm so glad I made you laugh.
Oh,
That's one.
yeah,
That was
absolutely. Not just me, I'm sure the listeners too.
yeah.
Stephen, I am so grateful, like bringing the great gratitude back for your time, for sharing your wisdom, and not just your wisdom, but also being vulnerable, taking us back to your childhood and your parents and, sharing the ups and downs parts of your life and giving us so much literally guidance.
Mm,
So I
mm,
am really, really, really grateful. And I'm sure our listeners will have certain inspirations that will lead to even more inspiration in their life when they have the courage to, take the time to either wake up in the morning and focus on the gratitude or to dance or to sing in their life. I think it can bring like simple things, coming back to what you said earlier about simplicity. I think simple things
mm.
can really have a large ripple effect. So
Absolutely.
I'm very
Absolutely.
grateful.
Pay it forward. Pay
Yes.
it forward. That's comes to mind. Sarah, I want to thank you especially. I really enjoyed getting to know you through this process here as well as before.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think you clearly are on purpose. I really get that. And
Thank
I
you.
learned things, a couple of things that you mentioned about the cat, for instance, that your heart starts to
Hmm.
starts to sync with the purring. It's like, of course, it makes sense, but I never thought about or heard that. And also the service you're providing, for the people that you touch in so many ways, through the podcast, through your clients, etc. You may you live long and prosper, as Spock used to say in Star Trek, and I really wish that on you. And I am delighted to hear and to feel and to sense your powerful, powerful connection with God.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen.
And
And
bless you.
thank you to you, to all our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with those you love, those who you're grateful for. Let them also be inspired, and would love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts, any questions, send either Stephen or us, like a message on Instagram or Facebook or an email, and we see you Wednesday.